I stood in the pristine kitchen of Manhattan's exclusive Meridian Club, adjusting my black catering uniform, while my sister Madison's engagement party buzzed in the adjoining ballroom. When Madison's fiancé, Chadwick Montclair, storms into the kitchen demanding more champagne, his eyes rake over me with disgust. "Just stay in the kitchen where you belong, help!" he sneers, emphasizing the last word like poison. My hands shake as I arrange canapes, knowing that in exactly 3 hours, his new boss will introduce me as the incoming CEO of Montclair Industries, the company Chadwick thinks he'll inherit. The scent of truffle oil and fresh herbs fills my nostrils as I steady myself against the stainless steel counter memories flooding back of how Madison and I ended up so far apart. We grew up in Cedar Falls, Ohio, where our parents ran Murphy's Diner on Main Street. Every morning before school, I'd help Mom prep the breakfast rush, while Madison painted her nails, declaring she was destined for bigger things than small-town life. Dad always said I had the head for numbers, watching me count register receipts and organize inventory with the precision of someone twice my age. Madison preferred charming customers, her bright smile and easy laugh, making even the grumpiest truckers leave generous tips. After high school, I earned a full scholarship to Harvard Business School, while Madison headed straight to New York City with dreams of designer bags and penthouse apartments. 5 years ago, everything changed when our parents died in a collision with a drunk driver on Highway 35. The funeral was the last time Madison and I really talked. She flew in wearing a black Chanel dress I knew she couldn't afford, while I handled all the legal paperwork and sold the diner to pay their debts. She returned to Manhattan immediately after the service. I threw myself into building my career in corporate consulting, specializing in turning around failing family businesses. Tonight's catering job was supposed to be temporary income while I transitioned between positions, but Madison doesn't know about my recent secret acquisition deal. She thinks I'm struggling financially, taking whatever work I can find. The irony tastes bitter as I watch her glide through the ballroom in her ivory silk gown, her practiced laugh echoing as she mingles with Manhattan's social elite. The engagement party showcases Madison's complete transformation from small-town girl to high-society princess. Her auburn hair is swept into an elegant chignon, her makeup applied by professionals, her posture refined through years of etiquette, classes she could barely afford. She's worked so hard to erase every trace of Cedar Falls from her voice and mannerisms. Through the service window, I watch her fiancé command attention at the bar. Chadwick Montclair stands 6 feet 2 inches tall with the kind of privileged confidence that comes from generations of family money. His navy blue Tom Ford suit probably costs more than most people make in 3 months. Everything about him screams old money, from his perfectly styled blonde hair to his Princeton class ring to the way he holds his scotch like it's a birthright. But then I notice something that makes my blood run cold. Chadwick steps away from the crowd, pulling out his phone with shaking fingers. I can't hear the words, but his body language screams desperation as he paces near the coat check area. His free hand runs through his hair, repeatedly destroying the perfect styling. When he hangs up, his face is pale despite the warm lighting. "Please just give me 2 more weeks." I catch him whispering into the phone during a second call. The engagement announcement will bring new investors. My father doesn't know about the losses yet. My heart pounds as the pieces click into place. Chadwick has been lying to Madison about his family's financial status. The man she thinks will provide security and luxury is drowning in debt, desperately trying to maintain appearances while his world crumbles around him. The cocktail hour begins with the soft tinkling of crystal glasses and polite laughter drifting from the main ballroom. I'm arranging smoked salmon canapes on silver platters when Chadwick approaches the service station where I'm working. His cologne, something expensive and overwhelming, fills the space between us as he looks me up and down with unconcealed disdain. "You must be Madison's little sister," he says, his voice dripping with condescension. "I've heard so much about you, though I have to say I expected someone more." He pauses, letting his eyes travel from my sensible black shoes to my hairnet. Ambitious. I keep my expression neutral, focusing on the delicate placement of capers on each appetizer. "It's nice to meet you, Chadwick. Madison's told me wonderful things about you." He laughs, a sharp sound that cuts through the kitchen noise. I'm sure she has. It must be difficult for her having family in the service industry, especially at her own engagement party. The other catering staff exchange uncomfortable glances. Jerome, the head waiter, a distinguished man in his 40s with kind eyes and graying temples, steps closer to our station, clearly listening. Patricia, the kitchen manager, stops chopping garnishes to watch the interaction unfold. "Everyone has to make a living," I reply evenly, reaching for another platter. But my hands tremble slightly as I arrange the food anger building in my chest, like steam in a pressure cooker. "Of course," Chadwick continues, his tone growing more vicious. "Though some of us are born to lead while others are clearly meant to serve. It's just the natural order of things." As if to demonstrate his point, he deliberately knocks over a glass of red wine that's sitting on the service counter. The burgundy liquid spreads across the white tablecloth and drips onto my uniform, staining the crisp fabric. "Oh, how clumsy of me," he says with mock concern. "I suppose you'll need to clean that up immediately. Can't have the help looking unpresentable." Every eye in the kitchen is now focused on our interaction. I feel the heat of embarrassment creeping up my neck, but I grab a clean towel and begin dabbing at the wine stain. The silence stretches uncomfortably until Patricia steps forward with a spare apron. "Here, dear," she says gently, her slight Spanish accent adding warmth to her words. "This will cover the stain until your shift ends." Chadwick watches this exchange with satisfaction, as if he's proven some fundamental point about hierarchy and human worth. See how efficiently the staff handles these little accidents Madison chose well when she hired this company. The implication is clear. I'm not family in his eyes, just another member of the hired help. Through the service window, I can see Madison laughing with a group of women in designer dresses, completely unaware of what's happening in the kitchen. "I should get back to my guests," Chadwick announces, straightening his cufflinks. "Important people are waiting for me. I trust the service will be impeccable for the rest of the evening." It's not really a question. It's a command delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who's never had to consider the feelings of people he considers beneath him. After he leaves, the kitchen remains unusually quiet for several long moments. Jerome is the first to speak, his voice low and controlled. Some people reveal their character through how they treat those they believe can't fight back. Patricia nods, her expression thoughtful. "In my 25 years managing kitchens, I've served plenty of wealthy families. The truly rich ones, the ones with real class, they treat everyone with respect. It's the insecure ones who need to put others down to feel important." Their words offer some comfort, but I can't shake the feeling that tonight is only going to get worse. As I tie Patricia's clean apron around my waist, I catch my reflection in the polished surface of a copper pot. My face looks strained older somehow, as if Chadwick's cruelty has physically aged me in the span of 10 minutes. But there's something else in that reflection, a spark of determination that reminds me exactly who I am beneath this uniform. Chadwick has no idea what's coming for him. In less than 3 hours, the balance of power will shift so dramatically that his head will spin. The question is whether I'll have the strength to endure his escalating abuse until that moment arrives. 20 minutes later, I'm in the ladies' room attempting to remove wine stains from my uniform when Madison bursts through the door. Her perfectly applied makeup can't hide the stress lines around her eyes, and her hands shake as she grips the marble countertop. "Erica, what are you doing here?" Her voice cracks with a mixture of embarrassment and desperation. "I mean, I know you're working the event, but why did you take this job at my engagement party?" I look at her reflection in the ornate mirror, seeing both the scared little girl from Cedar Falls and the polished woman she's become. "I needed the work, Madison. The catering company pays well, and I'm between positions right now." "Between positions?" She laughs, but there's no humor in it. "You have an MBA from Harvard Business School. You could get any corporate job you want. Instead, you're here serving my future in-laws wearing a uniform that smells like kitchen grease. Her words sting because I can hear the shame beneath them. She's not angry at me. She's terrified that my presence will somehow expose her own humble origins to these people she's worked so hard to impress. I'm sorry if my being here embarrasses you, I say quietly, turning to face her directly. But honest work never embarrassed Mom and Dad. Madison's composure crumbles at the mention of our parents. Tears well up in her eyes, threatening to destroy the 40-minute makeup application she endured this afternoon. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Erica. These people, Chadwick's family and friends, they're from a completely different world. One wrong move, one sign that I don't belong, and everything I've worked for disappears. She begins pacing the small bathroom, her designer heels clicking against the marble tiles. I love him, but more than that, I need him. I need this marriage to work because... She stops pressing her hands against her flat stomach. The gesture tells me everything. You're pregnant. Madison nods, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. 8 weeks. I haven't told anyone except you, and I'm terrified that if Chadwick finds out before we're married, he'll think I trapped him. His family is already suspicious of me. They think I'm a gold digger who's not good enough for their precious son. My heart aches for her, but I also feel a growing anger at the situation she's placed us both in. Madison, if he truly loves you, a pregnancy should be wonderful news. And if his family can't accept you for who you are, you don't get it. She interrupts, her voice rising. I've been taking fertility treatments for months trying to get pregnant. I lied about when my last period was so the timing would seem more romantic, more spontaneous. If they find out I planned this, that I manipulated the situation, the confession hangs between us like a toxic cloud. My sister, Sweet Madison, who used to cry when she stepped on ants, has been orchestrating an elaborate deception to secure her future. The desperation that drove her to such lengths makes me feel sick. I've been taking hormones that make me emotional and nauseous. She continues dabbing at her eyes with tissue. I've spent every penny of my savings on the right clothes, the right apartment lease, the right gym membership to fit into his world. I can't afford for anything to go wrong tonight. She grabs my hands, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my palms. Please, Erica, I know Chadwick can be a little arrogant sometimes, but he comes from old money. They have different standards, different expectations. If you could just endure his attitude for one night just until after the official announcements, I promise I'll make it up to you. Looking at my sister's tear-streaked face, I see the frightened girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. But I also see a woman who's willing to sacrifice her integrity and her family relationships for financial security and social status. What about love, Madison? What about being with someone who accepts you exactly as you are? She wipes her nose with the back of her hand, momentarily forgetting her ladylike training. Love doesn't pay rent, Erica. Love doesn't buy health insurance or secure your future. I've seen what happens when you depend on love alone. Look at Mom and Dad. They loved each other desperately, but they spent their whole lives one emergency away from losing everything. Her words cut deep because there's truth in them. Our parents did struggle financially despite their loving marriage and hard work, but there was also joy in their relationship, genuine partnership, and respect that Madison seems willing to trade for designer handbags and country club memberships. Just please, she whispers, gripping my hands tighter. Don't let him see that you're bothered by his attitude. Smile, do your job, and let me have this one perfect night. Tomorrow we can talk about everything else, but tonight I need you to help me secure my future. The irony of her request is almost unbearable. She's asking me to endure humiliation from a man who in a few hours will discover that I hold his professional fate in my hands. But looking at her desperate face, I realize that revealing the truth now might destroy her completely. Okay, I whisper, I'll get through tonight. The relief in her eyes is immediate and profound. She hugs me tightly, her expensive perfume mixing with the lingering scent of kitchen spices on my uniform. Thank you, she breathes. I love you, Erica. I know I don't show it well lately, but you're the only family I have left. As we separate, I catch our reflection in the bathroom mirror again. Two sisters who've chosen completely different paths, united by shared history, but divided by divergent dreams. In a few hours, everything will change for both of us, though only I know it yet. Returning to the kitchen, I'm assigned to serve appetizers during the cocktail reception. The elegant crowd mingles effortlessly, their conversation, a mixture of business deals, vacation homes, and charity galas. I move through the room like a ghost invisible to most guests, despite carrying trays of expensive canapes that cost more per piece than many people's hourly wages. But as I approach a cluster of distinguished older adults near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, their conversation stops me in my tracks. I recognize several faces immediately. These are members of Montclair Industries' board of directors, people I've researched extensively over the past 6 months. Richard's health is deteriorating faster than we anticipated, says Janet Holloway, the silver-haired woman who serves as the board's lead independent director. Her voice carries the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affect thousands of employees. The doctors give him 6 months, maybe less. Dr. William Chen, the company's longest-serving board member, adjusts his wire-rimmed glasses as he responds. The succession question becomes critical then. The company can't survive much longer with the current leadership vacuum. I hover nearby, refilling their water glasses with trembling hands while straining to catch every word. These conversations could provide crucial insight into the internal dynamics I'll be navigating as the new CEO. What's the latest assessment of Chadwick's readiness? Asks Margaret Foster, a formidable woman in her 60s, who built her own investment firm from nothing. Her tone suggests she already knows the answer won't be encouraging. Janet shakes her head grimly. The third quarter numbers were disastrous. Revenue down 18%, employee turnover at an all-time high, and 3 major clients terminated their contracts. Either he's completely incompetent or he's hiding something significant from his father. Probably both, Dr. Chen mutters, accepting the fresh glass of sparkling water I offer. He doesn't even glance at my face. I'm simply part of the background service that makes their lives comfortable. Margaret lowers her voice, forcing me to lean closer while pretending to arrange napkins on the nearby side table. Have we made a final decision about the external candidate? The consultant Richard identified. Janet nods slowly. Her credentials are impeccable. Harvard MBA track record of turning around 4 family businesses in similar situations, and she specializes in preserving company culture while implementing necessary changes. My pulse quickens. They're talking about me, but none of them recognize the woman they're discussing in the catering uniform standing 3 feet away. The irony is perfect. Dr. Chen continues. Richard spent 30 years building this company on the principle of treating employees like family. His son has systematically destroyed that culture through arrogance and neglect. We need someone who can restore those values while having the business acumen to save the bottom line. Margaret glances around the room, her eyes briefly scanning past me without recognition. Does Chadwick have any idea what's coming? None whatsoever, Janet replies with satisfaction. Richard wanted the board to make this decision independently. He's tired of his son's failures and realizes that blood relationships don't guarantee business competence. Their conversation shifts to technical details about the transition timeline and legal requirements, but I've heard enough to understand the full scope of what's happening. Richard Montclair, the man I'm supposed to meet in approximately 2 hours, specifically requested me for this position after studying my work with other struggling family enterprises. More importantly, the board members are actively looking for reasons to support an outside leadership change. Chadwick's treatment of employees, his financial mismanagement, and his character deficiencies are being carefully documented and evaluated. As I move away from their conversation, the full irony of the situation hits me like a physical blow. Chadwick has spent the evening treating me like trash because he sees me as beneath his social status. Meanwhile, the people who actually control his professional future are witnessing his behavior and drawing conclusions about his fitness for leadership. The appetizer trays feel heavier as I carry them back toward the kitchen, weighted down by the knowledge I'm carrying. In less than 2 hours, these same board members will be applauding my introduction as their new CEO. Chadwick will learn that the woman he's been humiliating holds complete authority over his career prospects. But the revelation also brings sobering responsibility. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're real people's livelihoods, families depending on paychecks, communities built around company operations. The weight of that responsibility settles on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Jerome approaches as I set down the empty trays, his experienced eyes reading the tension in my posture immediately. "Heavy thoughts for someone serving canapes," he observes quietly. I look at him more carefully, noting the intelligence in his expression and the way he carries himself with quiet dignity, despite wearing the same service uniform I am. Sometimes the most important conversations happen when people think no one important is listening, I reply carefully. His smile suggests he understands exactly what I mean. In my experience, the best leaders are often the ones who've spent time seeing the world from the bottom up. Before I can respond, Chadwick's voice booms across the reception area, calling for more champagne, with the imperious tone of someone who's never been denied anything in his life. The sound makes my stomach clench with dread, knowing that his cruelest moments are still ahead. But now I also know that every word he speaks, every dismissive gesture he makes, is being evaluated by people who have the power to determine his future. The evening suddenly feels less like endurance and more like evidence gathering. The dinner service begins with military precision as Jerome coordinates the front of house staff while Patricia orchestrates the kitchen like a symphony conductor. I'm assigned to serve the head table where Chadwick sits beside Madison, his parents Richard and Eleanor Montclair, flanking them like bookends of old money elegance. Richard Montclair appears frailer than I expected from his corporate photographs, his once imposing frame diminished by illness, but his pale blue eyes remain sharp and assessing. Eleanor sits ramrod straight in vintage Chanel, her silver hair styled in a perfect chignon that probably took 2 hours to achieve. She surveys the room with the practiced eye of someone who's hosted charity galas for decades. As I approach their table with the first course seared scallops with truffle foam, Chadwick's voice cuts through the elegant dinner conversation like a rusty blade. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announces loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear, "I'd like you to meet Madison's sister Erica. She's serving us tonight, which provides a wonderful opportunity to discuss the importance of honest work." Every head at the table turns toward me, creating a spotlight of attention that makes my skin burn with embarrassment. I keep my expression neutral while setting down the delicate plates, but inside I'm screaming. It's so refreshing to see young people willing to take any job available. Eleanor comments with the kind of patronizing sweetness that wealthy women perfect over decades of charity work. Service positions teach valuable lessons about humility and dedication. Madison's face has gone completely white, except for 2 bright spots of color on her cheeks. She stares down at her plate as if the scallops contain the secrets of the universe, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Absolutely. Chadwick continues warming to his theme like a politician who's found his favorite talking point. Though of course some people are naturally suited for leadership, while others find their calling in support roles. It's all about recognizing your proper place in the social hierarchy. Dr. William Chen, seated at the adjacent table with other board members, raises an eyebrow at this comment. I catch him exchanging a meaningful glance with Janet Holloway, who's quietly taking notes on her phone. "Erica, could you bring me a different napkin?" Chadwick requests with exaggerated politeness. "This one seems to have a spot on it." I examine the pristine linen napkin, which is obviously perfect, but I nod and move toward the service station. As I walk away, I hear him continue his commentary. The service industry really is a noble profession for those who lack the intellectual capacity for more demanding careers. Madison has told me that her sister struggled academically, so it's wonderful that she's found work that matches her abilities. The lies hit me like physical blows. Madison knows perfectly well that I graduated summa cum laude from Harvard, but she sits in silence while her fiancé assassinates my character for the entertainment of his dinner companions. When I return with an identical napkin, Chadwick inspects it theatrically before declaring it acceptable. You see how attention to detail separates quality service from mediocrity. I always notice when staff members take pride in their work, no matter how simple the task. His condescension is so thick, I could cut it with the sterling silver butter knife on his bread plate. But worse than his individual cruelty is the way several other guests begin joining the conversation, treating my presence like a teaching moment about class differences. It's admirable that some people are content with simpler lives, comments Harrison Whitfield, a hedge fund manager whose divorce made headlines in the financial press. Not everyone needs the stress of high-stakes decision-making. His wife Priscilla nods sagely while cutting her scallops into precise pieces. I always tell my housekeeper how much I admire her satisfaction with domestic work. Some people are just born to nurture and serve others. The conversation continues around me as if I'm a statue rather than a human being with thoughts and feelings. They discuss working-class psychology, the nobility of service, and the natural order of social stratification, while I stand beside their table, holding a water pitcher. Richard Montclair has remained silent throughout this exchange, but I notice his increasingly dark expression as his son holds court. When Chadwick launches into an anecdote about teaching proper respect to insubordinate employees at his father's company, the older man's jaw tightens visibly. "Perhaps we should focus on celebrating this lovely evening," Richard suggests quietly, but there's steel beneath his polite tone. Chadwick either misses or ignores the warning. "Of course, Father. I was simply making the point that understanding social dynamics is crucial for effective leadership. When I take over Montclair Industries, these insights will help me manage our workforce more efficiently." The presumption in his statement hangs in the air like smoke from a backfiring engine. Several board members at nearby tables have stopped their own conversations to listen their expressions, ranging from amusement to disgust. Margaret Foster leans toward Janet Holloway and whispers something that makes both women smile grimly. Dr. Chen pulls out his phone and begins typing what looks suspiciously like detailed notes. As I serve the second course, Chadwick orchestrates his cruelest performance yet. "Erica, would you mind standing here for a moment? I'd like to illustrate a point about natural leadership presence." My stomach drops as I realize what's coming, but I have no choice except to comply. He gestures for me to position myself beside his chair like a prop in his presentation. "Notice the difference in bearing," he tells his captivated audience. "Some people naturally command respect and attention, while others simply fade into the background. It's not a judgment of personal worth, it's simply recognition of different roles in society." He stands up, emphasizing the height difference between us, then begins walking around me like a professor examining a specimen. Body language tells us everything we need to know about someone's place in the world. Confident posture versus deferential submission. Direct eye contact versus downward glances. These are the subtle indicators that separate leaders from followers. Madison finally looks up from her plate, tears threatening to spill from her eyes, but she still says nothing. The silence from my own sister feels like the deepest betrayal of all. Of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a natural follower. Chadwick continues, returning to his seat with satisfaction. Society needs people who are comfortable taking direction and supporting those of us called to leadership positions. The key is honest self-assessment and acceptance of your limitations. The applause from several tables feels like being pelted with stones. These people, educated, sophisticated, supposedly civilized individuals, are treating my humiliation as entertainment. But through my haze of anger and embarrassment, I notice something else. Not everyone is applauding. Richard Montclair sits with his hands folded, his expression unreadable, but his posture rigid with tension. The board members are watching with the intensity of scientists studying a particularly revealing experiment. Jerome appears at my elbow with perfect timing, providing an excuse for me to step away from the table. "The kitchen needs you for a moment," he says quietly, his voice carrying just enough authority to make my departure seem natural rather than like fleeing. As I walk toward the kitchen on shaking legs, I hear Chadwick's laughter following me across the dining room, but I also hear something else, murmured conversations at the board tables that suggest not everyone found his performance as charming as he intended. The kitchen feels like sanctuary after the dining room's hostile spotlight. I lean against the prep counter, trying to steady my breathing while the sounds of service continue around me. My hands shake as I reach for a glass of water, the liquid sloshing slightly as I lift it to my lips. Jerome appears beside me with a clean apron and a gentle expression that somehow manages to convey both sympathy and strength. Some people reveal exactly who they are when they think they have power over others, he says quietly, untying his own apron and folding it precisely. "I've worked a lot of events like this," I reply, keeping my voice steady despite the storm inside my chest, "but nothing quite like that." He studies my face with the kind of attention that suggests he sees more than most people bother to look for. "I don't think you have worked a lot of events like this. Your hands, they're not the hands of someone who spent years in food service. No burns, no scars, nails too perfect despite the work. And the way you carry yourself when you think no one's watching, that's not learned behavior from this industry." My pulse quickens. Jerome's observations are uncomfortably accurate, and I realize I may have underestimated both his intelligence and his attention to detail. "I've noticed other things too." He continues, pulling out a chair and gesturing for me to sit. "You listen to business conversations with the focus of someone who understands corporate terminology. When those board members were discussing quarterly reports, your expression changed. Most servers would tune out technical discussions they couldn't follow." I perch on the edge of the chair, every muscle in my body tense with the possibility of exposure. Maybe I just pay attention to everything. Maybe. He settles into the chair across from me, his movements deliberate and thoughtful. "Or maybe you're someone who's been on the other side of those conversations before. Someone who knows what it means when board members discuss succession planning and external candidates." The accuracy of his assessment sends chills down my spine, but there's something in his manner, a careful respect rather than predatory curiosity, that suggests his interest might be supportive rather than threatening. "Can I tell you something about myself?" he asks, apparently sensing my internal struggle. 20 years ago, I was the youngest vice president in the history of Hartwell Financial, corner office, six-figure salary company, car stock options that would have set me up for life. This revelation hits me like cold water. The distinguished man sitting across from me in a server's uniform was once exactly the kind of executive I've been consulting with for the past 5 years. "What happened?" I ask, genuinely curious now rather than defensive. His smile carries decades of hard-won wisdom. "I discovered that success without fulfillment is just an expensive form of emptiness. I was making money hand over fist, but I went to bed every night feeling like I'd spent the day lying to people who trusted me. The pressure to meet quarterly projections led to decisions that hurt employees and customers, but boosted shareholder value." He runs his hand through his graying hair, disrupting the careful styling that somehow still looks professional, despite the service uniform. "One day, I was downsizing a department to improve profit margins. I had to fire a single mother who'd been with the company for 8 years, whose performance reviews were spotless, whose only crime was earning a salary that cut into our bonuses." "So you quit?" "Not immediately. It took another year of sleepless nights and moral compromises before I finally walked away. I spent 6 months traveling, thinking about what kind of life I actually wanted to live. When I came back, I discovered that working in hospitality, really serving people, making their special occasions memorable, gave me more satisfaction than any corporate achievement ever had. The story explains the contradiction I sensed in Jerome from the beginning. He moves through this kitchen with the confidence of someone who's commanded boardrooms, but he treats every task with the dedication of someone who's chosen his work rather than settled for it. The interesting thing about service work, he continues, is that you see people's true characters. When someone thinks you can't fight back when they believe your opinion doesn't matter, they drop their masks. Tonight, everyone in that dining room revealed exactly who they are beneath their expensive clothes and polite manners. He leans forward slightly, his expression growing more intense. That young man out there, Chadwick, he's not just arrogant, he's desperate. I've seen that particular combination of cruelty and panic before, usually right before someone's world comes crashing down. What do you mean? Financial pressure. Jerome's voice drops to barely above a whisper. I've been watching him all evening. The expensive clothes with small signs of wear shoes that have been resold, a watch that's the previous year's model cufflinks that probably belonged to his grandfather. He's maintaining appearances while running out of money. The observation aligns perfectly with the phone calls I overheard earlier, but Jerome's analysis goes deeper than simple financial trouble. More than that, though, the way he talks about taking over his father's company assumes a level of entitlement that suggests he has no idea how precarious his position really is. Real executives, people who've earned their authority, don't need to humiliate servers to feel powerful. Patricia approaches our corner of the kitchen carrying a fresh pot of coffee, her expression concerned. Is everything okay over here? That scene in the dining room was uncomfortable to watch. Jerome nods toward her. Patricia's worked for some of the wealthiest families in Manhattan. Tell her what you've observed about different types of rich people. Patricia sets down the coffee pot and joins our conversation, her voice carrying the authority of decades in high-end service. The ones with real money, old money, they treat everyone with basic respect. They understand that wealth comes with responsibility, not just privilege. It's the nouveau riche, the insecure ones who need to prove their status by putting others down. And the desperate ones. Jerome adds quietly, they're the most dangerous of all. When someone's financial security depends on maintaining a facade, they'll do almost anything to protect their image. Their insights crystallize something I've been sensing all evening, but couldn't quite articulate. Chadwick isn't just being casually cruel, he's actively working to establish a hierarchy that places him firmly at the top and everyone else beneath him. It's the behavior of someone who feels his position slipping away and is frantically trying to reassert control. The question, Jerome says, looking directly at me with those perceptive eyes, is what happens when someone like that discovers his assumptions about power dynamics were completely wrong. Before I can respond, we hear Chadwick's voice booming from the dining room, demanding attention for what sounds like an impromptu speech. Jerome and Patricia exchange glances that suggest they're preparing for another round of theatrical arrogance. Whatever happens next, Jerome says, standing and retying his apron with practiced efficiency, remember that dignity isn't something other people can take away from you. It's something you choose to maintain regardless of how others behave. His words feel like armor as I prepare to return to the dining room for whatever fresh humiliation awaits. But they also feel like preparation for something bigger, a reminder that the evening's power dynamics are about to shift in ways that no one except me can anticipate. As Jerome returns to the dining room to oversee the next course, Patricia guides me toward the quieter prep area where vegetables wait to be transformed into elegant garnishes. Her movements are economical and practiced as she begins dicing shallots with knife skills that would impress professional chefs. 30 years ago, I came to this country with nothing but determination and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. She begins her slight accent, adding melody to words that carry the weight of lived experience. My English was terrible. My credentials from Mexico meant nothing here, and I had 3 children to feed after my husband died in a construction accident. She slides the diced shallots into a small bowl and reaches for a red onion, her knife moving in perfect rhythm as she speaks. The first job I found was washing dishes in a restaurant kitchen 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. The chef was a cruel man who screamed at everyone, but especially at the immigrant women he thought couldn't fight back. "That sounds horrible," I murmured, genuinely moved by her story. "It was," she agrees, but there's no self-pity in her voice. "But it also taught me something valuable. People who need to humiliate others to feel powerful are usually the weakest ones in the room. They're fighting their own insecurities by creating someone else to look down on." Patricia sets down her knife and turns to face me fully, her dark eyes serious and kind. "That man out there tonight, Chadwick, he reminds me of that chef. All volume and cruelty, but no real substance underneath. The difference is, the chef actually had skills. He could create beautiful food when he wasn't busy destroying people's spirits. This boy just has inherited expectations and a desperate need to prove he belongs somewhere he's never earned the right to be." She returns to her prep work, beginning to julienne carrots with mechanical precision. "I spent 5 years in that first kitchen learning everything I could about food service while saving every penny. When I finally had enough money, I enrolled in culinary school at night while working days. It took me 8 years to work my way up to kitchen manager, but every step was earned through competence and dedication. Your children must be proud of what you've accomplished." Patricia's face lights up with the kind of joy that comes from genuine achievement. "My oldest daughter is a doctor. Now my son is an engineer, and my youngest just graduated from law school. They understand that success isn't about having the right last name or the right connections. It's about working hard, treating people with respect, and never compromising your integrity for convenience." She moves to the stove to check on a reduction sauce, stirring it carefully while continuing her story. "About 15 years ago, I worked for a family that owned several restaurants. The father was a good man who built his business from nothing, but his son was entitled and lazy. Sound familiar?" I nod, seeing the parallels she's drawing. "The son would come into the kitchens and treat the staff like personal servants, making unreasonable demands and throwing tantrums when things didn't go his way. But the father was watching everything, taking notes about his son's character and leadership abilities." Patricia tastes the sauce and adds a pinch of salt before continuing. "One day, the son went too far. He screamed at one of our prep cooks, a young woman from El Salvador who was working 2 jobs to support her sick mother, calling her stupid and threatening to have her deported if she didn't work faster. He didn't know that the father was standing in the doorway watching the whole thing." "What happened?" "The father fired his own son that afternoon and promoted the kitchen manager to general manager of all 3 restaurants. The son's inheritance was reduced to a small trust fund, and the father made it clear that respect for employees was non-negotiable in his business." She wipes her hands on a clean towel and moves to check the garnish stations, making small adjustments with the eye of someone who understands that presentation matters as much as flavor. The lesson is that character reveals itself under pressure, and people in real power are always watching how others treat those they consider beneath them. A man who humiliates servers will humiliate employees, customers, and eventually his own family when it serves his purposes. Through the service window, we can see Chadwick holding court at his table, gesturing expansively, while the other diners listen with varying degrees of attention. Richard Montclair looks increasingly uncomfortable with his son's performance, while Madison stares at her plate as if trying to disappear entirely. "That poor girl," Patricia murmurs, following my gaze to my sister. "She's trapped between love and survival, between family loyalty and social ambition. I've seen it before, women who think marrying money will solve all their problems, only to discover they've traded their freedom for a different kind of prison." "She's pregnant." I confess quietly, the words slipping out before I can stop them. "She thinks marriage is her only option for security." Patricia's expression softens with understanding. "Ah, that explains the desperation. Fear makes people do things they never thought they would do, accept treatment they know is wrong. But sometimes, the very thing we think will save us ends up destroying everything we really value. She begins plating the next course with artistic precision, each element positioned perfectly on the white porcelain. You know what I learned from 30 years in kitchens? The most important ingredient in any recipe is respect. Respect for the food, respect for the people you're feeding, respect for the colleagues who work beside you. Without respect, even the most expensive ingredients become bitter. Her words carry weight beyond cooking metaphors. As I watch her create beautiful plates from simple ingredients, I see decades of dignity maintained through countless challenges, success built on competence rather than entitlement. One more thing, she says, handing me a perfectly plated appetizer to carry to the dining room. Sometimes the people who treat you worst are about to face the biggest surprises. Karma doesn't always work on our timeline, but it rarely forgets an address. Her knowing smile suggests she senses something significant brewing beneath the evening's surface tensions. As I balance the elegant plates on my tray, I carry with me not just food, but the wisdom of someone who's survived every kind of workplace cruelty and emerged stronger. The dining room awaits along with whatever fresh humiliation Chadwick has planned for the next course. But Patricia's stories have reinforced something I'd been forgetting, that true power comes from character and competence, not from the ability to make others feel small. In less than 90 minutes, those principles will be tested in ways that none of these guests can imagine. The main course service begins as Richard Montclair makes his entrance after stepping away for what appeared to be important phone calls. Despite his obvious illness, the slight tremor in his hands, the careful way he moves the pallor that expensive clothes can't quite disguise, he carries himself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. I'm tasked with serving his table personally, an assignment that makes my pulse quicken with nervous anticipation. This is the man who specifically requested me for the CEO position, though he has no idea that the woman approaching with his dinner plate is the same corporate consultant whose work he's been studying for months. "The lamb looks exceptional," he comments as I set the plate before him, his voice carrying the kind of warmth that suggests genuine appreciation rather than perfunctory politeness. "Please give my compliments to the chef." "I'll be sure to pass that along, sir," I reply, noting how his pale blue eyes seem to take in details that most people miss: the steadiness of my hands, despite the evening stress, the way I move efficiently without appearing, rush the fact that I make appropriate eye contact without overstepping social boundaries. "Have you worked many events at the Meridian Club?" he asks, cutting into his lamb with precise movements that suggest either military training or excellent breeding. "This is my first time at this particular venue," I answer honestly, "but the catering company has an excellent reputation throughout Manhattan." Chadwick, seated to his father's right, jumps into the conversation with the enthusiasm of someone who thinks he's found another opportunity for social commentary. "Father, this is Madison's sister, the one I was telling you about earlier. Quite a character study in different approaches to life." Richard's expression doesn't change, but something in his posture suggests increased attention rather than polite disinterest. "Is that so? And what observations have you made about different approaches to life?" The question sounds innocent enough, but there's an undercurrent that makes Chadwick straighten slightly in his chair. For the first time all evening, he seems to sense that his father might not be entirely supportive of his commentary. "Well," Chadwick begins, his confidence wavering slightly, "I was simply noting how some people are naturally suited for leadership roles, while others find fulfillment in service positions. It's not a value judgment, just recognition of different aptitudes and ambitions." "I see." Richard takes a sip of wine, his eyes moving between his son and me with the calculating attention of someone gathering data for future decisions. "And you feel qualified to make these assessments based on what criteria exactly?" The question hangs in the air like smoke from a misfired gun. Several other guests at the table pause their own conversations to listen, sensing tension beneath the polite surface. "Experience, I suppose," Chadwick replies, his voice losing some of its earlier bravado. "Leadership training, business education, exposure to different types of people in professional settings." Interesting. Richard cuts another precise bite of lamb, chewing thoughtfully before continuing. In my experience, the most effective leaders are usually those who've had experience seeing organizations from multiple perspectives. Some of our best executives started in entry-level positions where they learned to understand every aspect of our operations. I feel a slight tremor of excitement as I realize what's happening. Richard isn't just making conversation, he's conducting an assessment of his son's character and judgment, while simultaneously evaluating my responses to the situation. Of course, hands-on experience is valuable. Chadwick agrees, apparently missing the subtle criticism in his father's words. But there's also something to be said for natural leadership instincts and proper preparation for executive responsibilities. Natural leadership instincts. Richard repeats slowly, as if testing the phrase for flavor. How exactly would you define those? Eleanor Montclair, who's been quietly observing this exchange while picking at her dinner, suddenly looks up with sharp interest. After 40 years of marriage, she clearly recognizes when her husband is building towards something significant. Well, Chadwick continues, encouraged by what he interprets as his father's interest. Confidence, decisiveness, the ability to command respect and maintain appropriate boundaries with subordinates. People need to understand hierarchy and their place within it. Richard nods thoughtfully, then turns his attention back to me. Miss Erica. I supply, grateful that he's asking for my name rather than treating me as invisible furniture. Erica, in your experience working various events, have you observed what makes some hosts more effective than others? The question is clearly a test, though I'm not entirely sure what he's testing for. But his sincere interest and respectful tone contrast so sharply with his son's behavior that I decide to answer honestly. The most successful hosts I've worked for treat everyone with respect, regardless of their role in the evening. I say carefully. They understand that good service comes from people who feel valued, not people who feel intimidated. Excellent observation. Richard's approval is subtle, but unmistakable. I've noticed that organizations tend to reflect the character of their leadership. Companies with respectful, collaborative cultures usually have executives who model those behaviors consistently. Chadwick's expression grows increasingly uncomfortable as he realizes his father's questions aren't leading toward the validation he expected. Of course, respect is important. He backpedals. I was simply making the point that clear hierarchy prevents confusion and maintains efficiency. Clear hierarchy, yes. Richard agrees, but hierarchy based on competence and contribution rather than accident of birth or social connections. Don't you think, Erica, that the most effective organizations promote based on merit rather than relationships? The question is clearly directed at both of us, but the way Richard phrases it suggests he's more interested in my response than his son's. I sense an undercurrent of deeper meaning in everything he's asking. In my experience, I reply, choosing my words carefully. The strongest organizations are those that cultivate talent at every level and provide opportunities for people to demonstrate their capabilities regardless of their starting position. Beautifully said. Richard's smile is warm and genuine, the kind of expression that suggests he's just confirmed something important. That philosophy has been the foundation of Montclair Industries for 3 decades. We've built our success by recognizing that exceptional people come from unexpected places. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of the next course, but as I move away from their table, I catch Richard's eye one more time. The look he gives me is brief but unmistakable recognition, approval, and something that looks almost like anticipation. Chadwick, meanwhile, appears increasingly agitated as he realizes that his attempts to impress his father with his social insights have somehow backfired. His face is flushed, and he's gripping his wine glass with white knuckles. As I return to the kitchen, I carry with me the strange sensation of having passed some kind of audition I didn't know I was taking. Richard Montclair has just spent 15 minutes evaluating both his son's character and my responses to pressure, and I have the distinct feeling that the results weren't what Chadwick expected. In exactly 1 hour, the formal announcements begin. The weight of that approaching moment feels heavier with each passing minute. The cheese course provides an opportunity for guests to mingle between tables, creating a social flow that allows me to overhear multiple conversations simultaneously. The board members, I notice, have arranged themselves strategically throughout the dining room, each positioned to observe different aspects of the evening's dynamics. Janet Holloway approaches the dessert station where I'm arranging petit fours on tiered silver stands. Her movements are deliberate and professional, the kind of calculated positioning that suggests years of corporate maneuvering. The service tonight has been exceptional. She comments loud enough for nearby guests to hear. It's refreshing to work with staff who maintain professionalism regardless of circumstances. Her words are clearly directed at me, but they're also positioned as commentary for the benefit of other listeners. Margaret Foster, standing within earshot while examining the wine selection, nods approvingly. "I was just thinking the same thing," Margaret adds, moving closer to our conversation. "Some of our hosts tonight could learn something about grace under pressure from the catering team." The compliments feel genuine, but there's something calculated about their timing and delivery. These women didn't achieve their positions by accident. They understand how to send messages through seemingly casual interactions. Dr. Chen joins the group, accepting a small plate of cheese and fruit with the kind of careful attention that suggests he's monitoring more than just the food quality. I've been impressed by the staff's ability to maintain service excellence, despite some challenging interactions this evening. His comment is diplomatic enough to sound polite, while clearly referencing Chadwick's earlier behavior. The three board members exchange glances that suggest they're all thinking the same thing, but waiting for someone else to articulate it directly. Leadership assessment often happens in unexpected moments, Janet observes, selecting a piece of aged Gouda with careful precision. How someone treats people they perceive as powerless reveals character more clearly than any boardroom presentation. Margaret nods meaningfully. It's particularly telling when someone assumes they understand power dynamics without recognizing all the variables in play. Their conversation feels like code, each comment layered with meanings that extend far beyond social pleasantries. As I continue arranging desserts, I catch fragments of similar discussions at other tables throughout the room. Harrison Whitfield and his wife Priscilla have positioned themselves near the bar, where they can observe the main dining area. Their earlier enthusiasm for Chadwick's social commentary has cooled considerably as the evening progressed. Did you notice how uncomfortable Richard looked during his son's little lecture about natural leadership? Priscilla murmurs to her husband, her voice carrying just far enough to reach the neighboring tables. "Hard to miss," Harrison replies, swirling his brandy thoughtfully. "I've known Richard for 20 years, and I've never seen him look so disappointed in his own child." Eleanor Montclair, who's been quietly observing these various conversations while maintaining her position at the head table, finally approaches the dessert station herself. Her movements are regal and controlled, the kind of practiced elegance that comes from decades of high society events. "The evening has been lovely," she tells me with the kind of polite warmth that wealthy women use when they want to make a point without appearing confrontational. "I hope you haven't found the service too challenging tonight." The question sounds innocent enough, but her eyes convey genuine concern, mixed with something that might be apology. She's clearly aware of her son's behavior and feels some responsibility for it. "Everyone has been very gracious," I reply diplomatically, though we both know that's not entirely accurate. Eleanor nods slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Good service requires mutual respect. I've always believed that how we treat those who serve us reflects our own character more than theirs." Her comment is delivered loudly enough for several nearby guests to hear, including Chadwick, who's engaged in animated conversation with a group of younger socialites near the windows. His laughter sounds forced, and I notice he keeps glancing toward his parents' table, as if seeking approval that isn't forthcoming. Janet Holloway, still positioned near the dessert station, takes this opportunity to engage Eleanor in conversation. "You and Richard have built such an impressive legacy with Montclair Industries. The company's reputation for employee relations is remarkable in today's business climate." "Thank you," Eleanor replies graciously. Richard has always insisted that our success depends on treating everyone from executive assistants to senior management with dignity and respect. It's not just good policy, it's good business. The conversation attracts Margaret Foster and Dr. Chen, creating an impromptu gathering of influential people, discussing leadership principles within earshot of half the dining room. I realize this isn't accidental. They're staging a very public conversation about values and character. That philosophy becomes particularly important during leadership transitions. Dr. Chen observes his tone careful but meaningful. The next generation needs to understand that authority comes with responsibility to all stakeholders, not just shareholders. Margaret nods emphatically. Companies that lose sight of their foundational values during succession planning often struggle to maintain their competitive edge. Culture matters more than credentials when it comes to long-term success. Eleanor's expression grows increasingly serious as she processes the implications of this conversation. I hope the board feels confident about Montclair Industries' future direction, she says quietly, though her tone suggests she's not entirely sure she wants to hear the answer. Janet exchanges glances with her colleagues before responding carefully. We're committed to ensuring the company maintains its reputation for excellence and integrity, regardless of who leads it into the next phase. The diplomatic non-answer hangs in the air like an unspoken warning. Eleanor's face goes slightly pale as she realizes that her son's position as heir apparent might not be as secure as the family assumed. "Excuse me," she says suddenly, her composure cracking slightly. "I should check on Richard. He hasn't been feeling well lately." As Eleanor hurries back toward the head table, the board members remain clustered around the dessert station, their conversation shifting to lower tones but increased intensity. "How much more evidence do we need?" Margaret asks quietly. The third quarter numbers the employee satisfaction surveys to Knight's performance. It's clear that traditional succession planning isn't going to work. Dr. Chen nods grimly. The question is timing. Richard's health situation accelerates everything, but we need to ensure we're making decisions based on business necessity rather than personal disappointment. The external candidate solves both problems, Janet replies. Proven track record, no family politics specific experience with exactly these challenges. Plus, tonight's observations suggest she has the interpersonal skills to rebuild employee confidence. They're talking about me again, though. They still don't realize I'm standing 3 feet away arranging their desserts. The irony would be amusing if the implications weren't so enormous. As guests begin returning to their seats for the final course, I catch one last exchange between the board members that makes my stomach tighten with anticipation. 45 minutes until the announcements. Dr. Chen observes, checking his watch. Are we all comfortable with how this plays out? More comfortable than we would be with the alternative, Janet replies firmly. Some decisions are too important to be influenced by sentiment or tradition. Margaret nods her agreement. The shareholders, employees, and company legacy all depend on getting this right. Personal feelings can't be part of the equation. As they return to their tables, I'm left with the strange sensation of having witnessed my own professional future being discussed and decided by people who have no idea I'm listening. The weight of their expectations combined with the knowledge of what's about to unfold makes the final preparations feel surreal. In less than an hour, everyone in this room will understand exactly how dramatically the evening's power dynamics are about to shift. The dinner service is winding down when I notice Madison excusing herself from the head table, her face pale and her movements slightly unsteady. I watch through the service window as she heads toward the ladies' room, one hand pressed to her stomach in a gesture that could be morning sickness or pure anxiety. 5 minutes later, she hasn't returned, and Chadwick's voice is growing louder at the main table as he launches into what sounds like another impromptu lecture about business leadership. His audience appears increasingly uncomfortable, with several guests checking their phones or finding excuses to step away. I catch Jerome's eye and gesture toward the dining room. "I should check on my sister," I murmur. He nods understanding. "Take your time. Patricia and I can handle the final course preparations. I find Madison in the bathroom sitting on the small velvet chair near the mirror with her head in her hands. Her perfect makeup is streaked with tears, and her carefully styled hair has come partially undone from nervous finger combing. Madison. I approach carefully as if she might bolt at any sudden movement. Are you okay? She looks up with red-rimmed eyes that hold a mixture of shame, fear, and something that might be the beginning of clarity. I can't do this anymore, Erica. I just can't. Can't do what? Any of it. She gestures helplessly toward the door encompassing the entire evening beyond. I can't sit there and watch him humiliate you. I can't pretend that his behavior is acceptable just because I'm scared of being alone. I can't marry someone who treats my only family like garbage for his own entertainment. The words tumble out in a rush as if she's been holding them back all evening and finally reached her breaking point. Do you know what he said during the cheese course? He told the Ashfords that you probably dropped out of high school and that's why you're working service jobs. He said it was charitable of the catering company to hire someone with such obvious limitations. My stomach clenches with fresh anger, but I'm more concerned about the devastation on Madison's face than my own wounded pride. Madison, you don't have to defend me. I can handle whatever he says. But I should defend you! She explodes, her voice echoing off the bathroom tiles. You're my sister. You're the only family I have left, and I've been sitting there like a coward while he destroys your dignity for sport. What kind of person does that make me? She stands and begins pacing the small space, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. And the worst part is, I know he's lying. I know exactly how smart you are, how accomplished you are, how much you've achieved through your own hard work. But I've let him spread these horrible lies because I was too selfish and scared to speak up. You're pregnant and vulnerable, I say gently. Fear makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. Does it? She stops pacing and turns to face me directly. Or does fear just reveal who we really are when the stakes get high? Because right now I feel like the worst sister in the world, and I don't think pregnancy is an excuse for moral cowardice. Her phone buzzes with a text message, and she glances at it with growing alarm. He's looking for me. He wants to start the engagement toasts in 10 minutes, and he expects me to be appropriately grateful and supportive during his speech about our future together. What are you gonna do? Madison stares at her reflection in the ornate mirror, taking in her tear-streaked makeup and disheveled appearance. I'm gonna tell him exactly what I think about his behavior tonight. I'm gonna stand up for my sister the way I should have been doing all evening. Madison, think carefully about this. Once you confront him publicly, there's no going back. Your engagement, your plans, your security. What security? She interrupts bitterly. Security with a man who gets pleasure from humiliating people he sees as beneath him. What happens when I'm the one who disappoints him? What happens to our children if they don't meet his standards for social status? She pulls out her compact and begins attempting to repair her makeup with shaking hands. I've spent the last 2 hours watching him perform for his friends, using you as a prop to demonstrate his superiority. Every cruel word he spoke told me something about the man I was planning to marry and the life I was signing up for. Her phone buzzes again, this time with what sounds like an incoming call. Chadwick's name appears on the screen and Madison stares at it for several long seconds before declining the call. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, she says suddenly. This catering job, is it really just temporary work between positions, or is there something else going on? The question catches me off guard. Despite everything that's happened tonight, I hadn't planned on revealing my true situation to Madison until after the official announcement. But looking at her tear-streaked face and seeing genuine courage emerging from her fear, I realize she deserves to know the truth. There is something else, I admit carefully. But it's complicated, and the timing... Is it legal? She interrupts. Are you in some kind of trouble? No, nothing like that. If anything, it's the opposite of trouble. Her phone buzzes with another text, and this time the message preview is visible. Where are you? People are asking questions. Don't embarrass me tonight. The demanding tone of the message seems to steel Madison's resolve rather than intimidate her. He thinks he can control me through fear and manipulation. But you know what I realized? While sitting at that table, I'd rather be a single mother working 3 jobs than spend my life apologizing for existing. She stands up straighter, squaring her shoulders in a gesture that reminds me of our mother preparing to handle difficult customers at the diner. I'm going back out there and I'm going to tell him and everyone else exactly what I think about his behavior tonight. Madison, wait. I catch her arm gently. Before you do anything that can't be undone, just know that whatever happens next, you're not alone. You have options you don't even know about yet. She searches my face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. What do you mean? I mean that sometimes the worst moments in our lives turn out to be the beginning of something better than we ever imagined possible. Trust me on this. Her phone rings again, and this time she answers with newfound determination. I'll be right there, Chadwick. And yes, I have something to say during the toast tonight. I think everyone will find it very interesting. She hangs up before he can respond, then turns to me with a smile that's both terrified and exhilarated. Whatever you're not telling me, I hope it's as dramatic as this evening has been so far. As we prepare to return to the dining room, I realize that Madison's courage is about to collide with Chadwick's arrogance in a very public way. The timing couldn't be more perfect or more catastrophic depending on your perspective. In 30 minutes, Richard Montclair will make his announcement about the new CEO. But first, my sister is about to defend my honor in front of Manhattan's social elite, potentially destroying her engagement and her carefully constructed new life in the process. The evening's emotional crescendo is about to begin. As we prepare to leave the bathroom, my phone vibrates with an incoming call from my assistant, Sarah. I hesitate, knowing that answering now could complicate an already volatile situation, but the timing of her call suggests something urgent related to tomorrow's announcement. I need to take this quickly, I tell Madison. Go ahead, I'll be right behind you. Madison nods and heads back toward the dining room with determined steps, while I step into the small adjoining lounge area for privacy. Sarah, this isn't a great time, I say quietly into the phone. I'm sorry to interrupt your evening, but we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Sarah's voice carries the kind of professional urgency that usually precedes major complications. The lawyers just discovered some irregularities in Montclair Industries' recent financial filings. My blood turns cold. What kind of irregularities? Asset transfers, unauthorized stock sales, and what appears to be systematic embezzlement of company funds. The forensic accountants estimate approximately $2.3 million has been diverted from various accounts over the past 18 months. I sink into a nearby chair as the implications hit me. Do we know who's responsible? The digital signatures and access codes all trace back to Chadwick Montclair. It appears he's been using his interim management authority to liquidate company assets, presumably to cover personal debts. The board wasn't aware because he's been timing the transfers to coincide with quarterly reporting periods. Through the bathroom door, I can hear the sounds of guests returning to their seats and the gentle clinking of glasses being filled for the upcoming toasts. In a few minutes, Chadwick will stand up to celebrate his engagement, completely unaware that his criminal activity has just been exposed. How solid is the evidence? I ask, keeping my voice low. Ironclad. Bank records, digital trails, even security footage of him accessing the accounts during off hours. The lawyers say it's enough for immediate termination and criminal charges. They're recommending we contact law enforcement tonight. The timing is almost too perfect to be coincidental. Just as I'm about to be introduced as the new CEO, we discover that the previous heir apparent has been systematically stealing from the company he expected to inherit. There's something else, Sarah continues. The investigation revealed that he's been using company funds to maintain his lifestyle and cover gambling debts. The forensic team found evidence of regular transfers to offshore gambling sites and cash advances that were never repaid. This explains the desperate phone calls I overheard earlier and the financial pressure that Jerome observed in Chadwick's behavior. He hasn't just been living beyond his means, he's been stealing from his own family's company to fund his excesses. What's the timeline for action? I ask. The lawyers want authorization to notify law enforcement immediately. They're also recommending that we inform Richard Montclair before tonight's announcement given the family implications. I glance toward the bathroom door, knowing that beyond it lies a dining room full of people who have no idea their evening is about to take a dramatic turn towards scandal and criminal revelation. Hold off on law enforcement for now, I decide, but prepare all the documentation for immediate action. I have a feeling tonight's announcement is going to provide the perfect opportunity to address this situation comprehensively. Understood. Should I prepare a press statement about the leadership transition and the criminal investigation? Yes, but keep them separate for now. We may need to coordinate the release timing carefully. As I hang up, Jerome appears in the doorway with an expression of gentle concern. Everything all right? You look like you've received some disturbing news. You could say that. I study his face, remembering his earlier insights about corporate corruption and family business dynamics. Jerome, can I ask you something in confidence? Of course. In your corporate experience, did you ever encounter situations where family members were embezzling from their own companies? His expression grows grave. Unfortunately, yes. It's more common than people realize, especially when succession planning creates pressure and opportunity simultaneously. Why do you ask? Before I can answer, we hear Chadwick's voice booming from the dining room, calling for everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could return to your seats, I'd like to begin the evening's formal remarks. Jerome and I exchange glances that suggest we're both thinking the same thing. Whatever happens next is going to be memorable for all the wrong reasons. The interesting thing about corporate embezzlement, Jerome continues quietly, is that it usually accelerates when the perpetrator feels their position is threatened. Desperation leads to increasingly risky behavior and larger thefts. And what typically happens when it's discovered? Criminal charges, civil lawsuits, complete disgrace, and usually prison time. Family businesses take financial theft particularly seriously because it violates both professional and personal trust. Through the doorway, we can see guests settling into their seats, while Chadwick stands at the head table with a champagne glass, raised, his face flushed with excitement about what he assumes will be an evening of celebration and social triumph. There's something poetic about justice arriving just when someone thinks they've gotten away with their crimes, Jerome observes, especially when that someone has spent the evening demonstrating exactly the kind of character that makes their downfall feel inevitable. As we prepare to return to the dining room for what promises to be an explosive conclusion to the evening, I can't help but marvel at the perfect timing of Sarah's call. In less than 20 minutes, Richard Montclair will announce my appointment as CEO, but now that announcement will be coupled with the revelation that his son is a criminal. The evening's power dynamics aren't just about to shift, they're about to be completely obliterated. As Jerome and I return to the dining room, I'm surprised to find Patricia waiting for us near the service entrance. Her expression is serious, and she gestures for us to step back into the hallway for privacy. I need to tell you both something, she says quietly, glancing around to ensure we won't be overheard. 20 years ago, I worked for Montclair Industries. Not in catering, I was in their corporate office handling accounts receivable. This revelation stops me cold. You worked for Richard Montclair. For 3 years, until I was fired for reporting sexual harassment by Richard's brother, Vincent, who was serving as CFO at the time. Her voice carries old pain mixed with hard-won wisdom. Vincent was systematically pressuring female employees and using his family connection to avoid consequences. Jerome leans forward, his expression intent. What happened when you reported it? Richard was traveling extensively that year due to his wife's illness, and Vincent convinced him that I was making false accusations to cover up poor performance. I was terminated with minimal severance and a non-disclosure agreement that I was too scared and desperate to refuse. The injustice of her situation makes my chest tighten with anger, but Patricia's expression suggests there's more to the story. 6 months later, 3 other women came forward with similar complaints. Richard finally investigated properly and discovered that Vincent had been not only harassing employees, but also embezzling funds to pay for settlements and cover-ups. Vincent was fired, criminally prosecuted, and banned from any involvement in company operations. "Did Richard try to make things right with you?" I ask. Patricia's smile is sad but not bitter. "He tracked me down, personally apologized for the injustice, and offered me my job back with full back pay and a promotion. But by then I'd already started working in kitchens and discovered that I loved the hospitality industry. I declined his offer, but we've stayed in touch over the years." Jerome's eyes widen with understanding. "That's why you took this catering job tonight. You knew what was happening with the company succession." "Richard called me 2 weeks ago," Patricia confirms. "He told me about the board's decision to bring in outside leadership and mentioned that the announcement would be made tonight. He also expressed concerns about his son's character and asked if I'd be willing to observe Chadwick's behavior in an informal setting." The pieces click into place with startling clarity. "So Richard arranged for you to be part of tonight's catering team." "Not exactly arranged. I volunteer with this catering company regularly for charity events. But when I told him I'd be working tonight, he asked me to pay particular attention to how Chadwick treats service staff. He wanted an objective assessment from someone who understands both corporate culture and employee perspectives." Patricia pulls out her phone and shows us a series of detailed notes. "I've been documenting everything: his comments, his behavior, the reactions of other guests, the impact on staff morale. Richard specifically asked about leadership potential and respect for employees." "What's your assessment?" Jerome asks, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer. "Complete failure," Patricia replies without hesitation. "Chadwick demonstrates every characteristic of the toxic leadership that destroyed employee confidence during Vincent's tenure: arrogance, entitlement, casual cruelty, and complete disregard for the dignity of working people." She scrolls through her notes, highlighting specific incidents. But more concerning is his desperate need to establish dominance through humiliation. That behavior pattern often coincides with other forms of misconduct, financial, legal, or ethical violations that create anxiety and overcompensation. Her observation aligns perfectly with the embezzlement evidence Sarah just revealed, creating a comprehensive picture of Chadwick's unfitness for leadership. "There's something else," Patricia continues. "Richard specifically asked me to keep an eye on the catering staff tonight, particularly anyone who demonstrated unusual competence or leadership qualities under pressure." She looks directly at me with knowing eyes. "He described someone he'd been evaluating for a senior position, Harvard MBA corporate consulting background, expertise in family business transitions. Someone who would be working tonight in a service capacity as part of his assessment process. The truth hangs between us like a bridge waiting to be crossed." Jerome studies my face with growing understanding, while Patricia watches my reaction with the patience of someone who's already solved the puzzle. "You're not really a server," Jerome says quietly. It's not a question. "No." I admit feeling oddly relieved to finally drop the pretense with these 2 remarkable people. "I'm the outside leadership candidate the board has been considering. Tonight was supposed to be my final assessment before Richard makes the announcement." Patricia nods with satisfaction. "I thought so. Your responses to pressure, your business knowledge, your natural authority, despite the uniform, everything pointed to someone with executive experience." "But why the elaborate setup?" Jerome asks. "Why not just conduct traditional interviews?" "Because," Patricia explains, "Richard learned from his brother's tenure that character under stress reveals more about leadership potential than any boardroom presentation. He wanted to see how the new CEO candidate handled unfair treatment, whether she maintained dignity under pressure, and how she interacted with employees at every level. The brilliance of Richard's strategy becomes clear. Tonight wasn't just about evaluating my technical qualifications, it was about testing my values and character in real-world conditions that couldn't be faked or rehearsed. So all three of us have been participants in Richard's assessment process. Jerome realizes, Patricia as his eyes and ears me as an experienced executive evaluating leadership potential, and Erica as the candidate being tested. Which means, Patricia adds with growing excitement, we've all witnessed the same thing: Chadwick's complete failure as a leader and human being, contrasted with Erica's grace, competence, and dignity under impossible circumstances. Through the service window, we can see Chadwick standing at the head table, preparing to begin his engagement toast. His face is flushed with champagne and anticipated triumph, completely unaware that his career, his reputation, and his freedom are about to be destroyed. 15 minutes until Richard's announcement, Jerome observes, checking his watch. Perfect timing. Patricia agrees, then looks at me with a mixture of respect and anticipation. Are you ready to show everyone who you really are? The question carries weight beyond tonight's revelation. In a few minutes, I'll transform from invisible servant to corporate leader, from Chadwick's victim to his judge, from family embarrassment to Madison's salvation. The alliance between us, three people who understand the real meaning of dignity, hard work, and justice, feels unbreakable as we prepare for the evening's climactic moments. The dining room has settled into expectant quiet as Richard Montclair slowly rises from his seat at the head table. Despite his obvious illness, he commands immediate attention through pure force of personality, the kind of presence that comes from decades of making decisions that affect thousands of lives. Patricia, Jerome, and I position ourselves strategically around the room's perimeter, our service roles providing perfect vantage points to observe what's about to unfold. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm about to watch my own professional future announced while wearing a catering uniform. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard begins, his voice carrying clearly throughout the elegant dining room. Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate Madison and Chadwick's engagement. As we gather here among family and friends, I'm reminded of how important it is to surround ourselves with people who share our values and commitment to integrity. His opening words seem innocuous enough, but there's something in his tone, a gravitas, that suggests deeper meanings beneath the surface pleasantries. Eleanor Montclair watches her husband with growing tension, while Madison grips her champagne glass with white knuckles. Chadwick, still standing beside his chair, beams with confident anticipation. He clearly expects this to be his moment of validation, the public confirmation of his position as heir to the Montclair legacy. Before we toast the happy couple, Richard continues, I'd like to share some important news about Montclair Industries' future direction. As many of you know, my recent health challenges have prompted serious reflection about succession planning and the company's long-term leadership needs. The board members lean forward with synchronized attention while other guests murmur softly among themselves. Several people glance toward Chadwick, apparently expecting this to be his official coronation as the next company president. Building a sustainable business requires more than family connections or social breeding. Richard says, his voice growing stronger and more purposeful. It requires character competence and an unwavering commitment to treating every employee, from entry-level positions to senior management, with dignity and respect. Jerome catches my eye from across the room, his expression conveying both anticipation and admiration for Richard's strategic approach. Patricia has positioned herself near the kitchen entrance, her notepad discreetly ready to document whatever happens next. Over the past 6 months, Richard continues, our board of directors has conducted an exhaustive search for new leadership that embodies these principles while possessing the business acumen necessary to guide us through challenging market conditions. Chadwick's confident expression begins to waver slightly as he realizes this speech isn't following the script he expected. His eyes dart toward his father with growing confusion and something that might be the first stirring of genuine concern. The candidate we've selected brings exceptional credentials to this position. Richard announces, including a Harvard MBA extensive experience in corporate turnarounds and a specialized expertise in preserving company culture while implementing strategic changes. Around the room, guests begin looking toward Chadwick with congratulatory smiles, apparently assuming Richard is describing his son's qualifications in flattering terms. But those who know Chadwick's actual background, a mediocre state university degree and zero business experience outside his father's company, begin to look puzzled. Eleanor Montclair has gone very pale, her hands trembling slightly as she reaches for her water glass. She clearly recognizes that something unexpected is happening, though she hasn't yet grasped the full scope of what's coming. More importantly, Richard continues, his voice carrying increased conviction. Tonight's events have provided an invaluable opportunity to observe this candidate's character under pressure. Leadership isn't just about making decisions in comfortable boardroom settings. It's about maintaining integrity and dignity when faced with unfair treatment or challenging circumstances. The room's energy shifts palpably as guests begin to sense that this announcement isn't proceeding according to anyone's expectations. Conversations die, completely replaced by the kind of focused attention that accompanies moments of high drama. Madison stares at her father-in-law with growing alarm, apparently fearing that he's about to publicly criticize her family background or social status. Her face has gone ashen, and she keeps glancing between Richard and Chadwick as if trying to predict which direction the conversational bomb will explode. I've had the privilege of watching our new CEO demonstrate exactly the kind of leadership qualities that Montclair Industries needs, Richard says, turning slightly to scan the room with deliberate emphasis. Grace under pressure, competence despite difficult circumstances, and unwavering professionalism in the face of disrespectful treatment. Janet Holloway and the other board members are now watching with barely concealed satisfaction, clearly enjoying Richard's masterful setup for what they know is coming. Several other guests look increasingly confused as they try to reconcile Richard's description with their assumptions about traditional succession planning. Before I introduce our new CEO, Richard adds his tone, carrying a note of steel that suggests the evening's most dramatic moments are still ahead. I need to address some recent discoveries about financial irregularities within our company operations. Chadwick's face goes from confused to horrified in the span of 3 seconds. The color drains from his complexion as he realizes that his father isn't just announcing unexpected leadership changes, he's apparently aware of the embezzlement that Chadwick thought he'd successfully hidden. A forensic audit completed just hours ago revealed systematic theft of company funds, unauthorized asset transfers, and deliberate attempts to conceal these crimes through fraudulent reporting. Richard announces with prosecutorial precision. The individual responsible will face immediate termination, civil lawsuits for fund recovery, and criminal charges for corporate embezzlement. The dining room erupts in shocked murmurs as guests process this bombshell revelation. Eleanor Montclair looks as if she might faint, while Madison stares at her fiancé with dawning horror and recognition. Chadwick stands frozen beside his chair, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly as he struggles to process the complete destruction of everything he thought was secure. His face cycles through disbelief, panic, and desperate calculation as he searches for some escape from the trap that's closing around him. And now, Richard says with the timing of a master showman, I'd like to introduce the new CEO of Montclair Industries, whose performance tonight has confirmed every positive assessment in her extensive background evaluation. He pauses, letting the anticipation build to an almost unbearable level, then extends his hand toward the service area where I'm standing. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Erica Murphy. The silence that follows is so complete, it feels like the entire room has stopped breathing. The moment Richard speaks my name, the dining room transforms into a tableau of frozen shock. Every face in the room turns toward me with expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief to dawning recognition. The silence stretches so long it feels like time itself has malfunctioned. I straighten my shoulders, remove my service apron, and begin walking toward the head table with as much dignity as I can muster. Each step feels surreal, as if I'm moving through a dream where the fundamental rules of reality have been suspended. Chadwick stares at me with an expression of such complete horror that it might be comical under different circumstances. His mouth hangs open, his face has gone gray, and his hands shake visibly as the implications crash over him like successive tidal waves. Madison's champagne glass slips from nerveless fingers, shattering against the floor in a crystalline explosion that seems to break the room's paralyzed silence. She looks at me as if seeing a ghost, her eyes wide with shock and something that might be the beginning of hope. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard continues as I reach the front of the room, "Erica Murphy graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School and has spent the past 5 years building a reputation as one of the country's most effective corporate turnaround specialists. She has successfully restored profitability and employee confidence to 4 family businesses facing similar challenges to our own." The guests slowly begin to process this information, their faces showing the mental recalibrations happening in real time. Harrison Whitfield looks mortified as he remembers his condescending comments about working-class satisfaction. Priscilla Whitfield appears to be searching for a place to hide. More importantly, Richard adds with evident satisfaction, tonight's service provided an invaluable opportunity to assess her character under pressure. While being subjected to deliberate humiliation and disrespectful treatment, she maintained professionalism, dignity, and grace that confirm every positive evaluation in her extensive background check. Janet Holloway begins applauding, followed immediately by the other board members. Dr. Chen stands as he claps his expression, conveying both approval and vindication. Margaret Foster's applause is particularly enthusiastic, her smile suggesting deep satisfaction with how the evening has unfolded. But the board's approval is quickly overwhelmed by the murmurs and gasps rippling through the rest of the room as guests realize they've been witnessing a carefully orchestrated evaluation all evening. Chadwick finally finds his voice, though it emerges as more of a strangled whisper than actual speech. "This is impossible. She's nobody. She's service staff." His words hang in the air like toxic gas poisoning, whatever sympathy anyone might have felt for his obvious shock and devastation. "She's nobody," Richard repeats with dangerous quiet. "The woman you've spent the evening humiliating is Harvard-educated, professionally accomplished, and will be making decisions about your family's financial future. What exactly does that make you?" Eleanor Montclair rises unsteadily from her chair, her face stricken with shame and horror. "Chadwick, what have you done?" she whispers, though her voice carries clearly in the shocked silence. Madison stands slowly, her eyes never leaving my face as understanding dawns. "The MBA," she breathes. "The consulting work. The transition between positions. You weren't unemployed, you were preparing for this." I nod, watching my sister process the magnitude of what she's witnessing. "I wanted to tell you, but the timing had to be Richard's decision." "Tell me what?" Chadwick shouts, his voice cracking with desperation. "Tell you that she's been lying about everything, that this is some kind of elaborate fraud." His accusation triggers something in Madison that I haven't seen since we were children, the fierce protective instinct that used to emerge when neighborhood bullies picked on smaller kids. "Fraud," she snaps, turning on her fiancé with sudden fury. "You want to talk about fraud? How about lying to me about your gambling debts? How about stealing from your own father's company? How about pretending to love me while humiliating my sister for your entertainment?" The room's attention swings toward this new revelation like spectators at a tennis match. Chadwick's face cycles through panic, rage, and desperate calculation as he realizes that multiple aspects of his carefully constructed facade are crumbling simultaneously. "I don't know what lies she's been telling you," he says, gesturing wildly toward me. "But this is obviously some kind of setup, some elaborate scheme to destroy our engagement and steal control of my father's company." Richard's laugh is cold and humorless. Your father's company, the company you've been systematically robbing for 18 months, the company where your authority extends to exactly nothing because you've never demonstrated competence in any meaningful capacity. I'm your son, Chadwick shouts, apparently abandoning any pretense of dignity or control. I'm your blood. How can you hand over our family legacy to some random outsider? Blood. Richard's voice drops to a whisper that somehow carries more authority than any shout. You've spent tonight treating other human beings like garbage for your amusement. You've stolen millions of dollars from the company that employs hundreds of families. You've lied, cheated, and demonstrated such profound moral bankruptcy that the board unanimously agreed you're unfit for any leadership position. He pauses, letting these words sink in before delivering his final judgment. Being my son means you had every advantage, every opportunity, every possible support for success. The fact that you've squandered all of that while committing crimes against our own company doesn't make you a victim, it makes you a disgrace. Eleanor Montclair sinks back into her chair, tears streaming down her face as she witnesses the complete destruction of her family's reputation and her son's future. The elegant dinner party has transformed into a courtroom where justice is being served with brutal efficiency. Around the room, guests sit in stunned silence as they process not just the leadership announcement, but the criminal revelations and family implosion they're witnessing. Some look sympathetic, others appear fascinated by the drama, but most seem deeply uncomfortable with their involuntary participation in such a public destruction. Jerome steps forward from his position near the service entrance, his presence commanding attention despite his server's uniform. If I may, he says to Richard with respectful authority, I believe the dining room staff can attest to every aspect of tonight's character assessment. Patricia joins him, her notepad, visible as evidence of the systematic documentation Richard requested. The candidate demonstrated exceptional leadership qualities under impossible circumstances. She reports with professional precision. Meanwhile, the former heir apparent revealed character deficiencies that would pose significant risks to employee morale and company reputation. Their testimony carries unexpected weight, transforming from background service to expert witnesses in the evening's dramatic trial. As the full scope of the revelation settles over the room, I realize that everything has changed, not just for me and Chadwick, but for everyone present. They've witnessed the complete inversion of assumed power structures, the triumph of merit over entitlement, and the consequences of treating people as less than human. The evening's final act is about to begin. The aftermath of Richard's announcement unfolds with the intensity of a controlled explosion. As the initial shock begins to wear off, the room divides into distinct camps. Those celebrating justice serve those mortified by their earlier behavior, and those desperately trying to process the complete reversal of everything they thought they understood about power and status. Chadwick stands at the center of this social earthquake, his expensive suit rumpled and his face a mask of disbelief and rage. "This is illegal," he sputters, apparently grasping for any argument that might restore his position. "You can't just hand over a family company to some random consultant. The shareholders will never accept this." Janet Holloway rises from her seat with the authority of someone accustomed to boardroom battles. Actually, the board voted unanimously to approve this transition. The shareholders will be thrilled to see leadership that prioritizes long-term stability over short-term family politics. Dr. Chen joins her, pulling out his phone to display what appears to be legal documents. The forensic audit is complete, the evidence of embezzlement is overwhelming, and law enforcement has been notified. Your employment with Montclair Industries is terminated immediately effective tonight. The finality of these statements hits Chadwick like physical blows. He looks around the room, desperately seeking support from people who were laughing at his cruel jokes just hours earlier. But the same guests who applauded his humiliation of me now avoid eye contact, apparently unwilling to associate themselves with a proven criminal. Madison approaches slowly, her designer gown rustling as she moves with newfound confidence. When she reaches Chadwick, she removes her engagement ring with deliberate ceremony and places it on the table between them. "I can't marry someone who gets pleasure from destroying other people's dignity," she says clearly, her voice carrying throughout the silent room. "But more than that, I can't spend my life with someone whose character is so fundamentally broken that stealing from family feels acceptable." Chadwick stares at the ring as if it represents his last connection to the life he thought he was building. "Madison, please. You're pregnant with my child. We can work through this. I can change." "Actually," Madison replies with surprising strength, "I'm not pregnant. I've been taking fertility drugs, hoping to get pregnant, lying about timing to make it seem romantic and spontaneous. But watching you tonight made me realize that bringing a child into a relationship based on deception and cruelty would be the worst possible decision." This final revelation seems to break something fundamental in Chadwick's remaining composure. He sinks into his chair as if his bones have dissolved the weight of complete social and professional destruction, finally registering in his expression. Meanwhile, the other guests begin processing their own roles in the evening's events. Harrison Whitfield approaches me with obvious embarrassment, his earlier condescension replaced by genuine remorse. "I owe you a significant apology," he says quietly. "My comments tonight were inexcusable regardless of what I thought I knew about your background. I hope you can forgive what was clearly ignorant prejudice disguised as social commentary." His wife Priscilla stands beside him, her face red with shame. "I'm mortified by my behavior. There's no excuse for treating anyone the way we treated you tonight." Similar scenes begin playing out around the room as various guests approach to offer apologies, congratulations, or simply acknowledgement of the evening's moral lessons. The social dynamics that seemed so fixed and permanent just hours ago prove remarkably fluid when confronted with new information. Jerome removes his service apron and approaches the head table with the confident bearing that now makes perfect sense, given his corporate background. "Richard, I believe we discussed the possibility of my returning to an executive role if the right opportunity arose." Richard's face lights up with genuine pleasure. Jerome Matthews, former VP of Strategic Operations at Hartwell Financial, currently masquerading as head waiter for reasons of personal fulfillment. He extends his hand formally. "Would you consider serving as Chief Operating Officer for our newly restructured leadership team?" The offer clearly delights Jerome, who accepts with the enthusiasm of someone whose professional exile is finally ending. "I'd be honored to help rebuild the company culture that made Montclair Industries a model employer." Patricia steps forward as well, her documentation of the evening's events having transformed her from kitchen manager to corporate witness. "If I may," she addresses Richard directly, "I'd like to formally accept your offer from 20 years ago, the promotion to Director of Employee Relations with responsibility for ensuring that every worker from entry level to executive receives the respect and dignity they deserve." The convergence of these three career resurrections feels almost orchestrated, as if the evening's events were designed not just to reveal truth, but to restore justice to multiple people who'd been wronged by previous leadership failures. Eleanor Montclair finally speaks, her voice thick with emotion but steady with resolve. "Erica, I hope you can understand that what you witnessed tonight doesn't represent the values Richard and I tried to instill. We failed somewhere along the way, but I want you to know that your grace under impossible circumstances represents exactly the kind of leadership this company needs." Her apology carries the weight of maternal disappointment mixed with genuine respect for how I handled her son's cruelty. It's clear that Eleanor understands her family's reputation will be forever changed by tonight's revelations. Richard moves to the center of the room, commanding attention one final time. Before we conclude this remarkable evening, I want to share something about leadership philosophy that tonight's events have illustrated perfectly. He pauses, letting his words settle before continuing. "True leaders emerge not from privilege or inheritance, but from character, tested under pressure. Tonight we've seen someone maintain dignity while being deliberately humiliated, demonstrate competence while being dismissed as incompetent, and show grace while being treated with contempt. His eyes find mine across the room. These are the qualities that build lasting organizations and create workplace cultures where every employee can thrive. This is why our board chose merit over tradition, character over connections. The room erupts in sustained applause led by the board members, but spreading quickly throughout the dining room. Even some of the guests who participated in my earlier humiliation clap with apparent sincerity, perhaps recognizing their own opportunity for moral growth. As the applause dies down, I realize it's my turn to speak. The weight of the moment, professional triumph, family reconciliation, justice served, feels almost overwhelming, but I know these words will set the tone for everything that follows. Thank you all for witnessing what has been an extraordinary evening of revelation and transformation. I begin my voice steady despite the emotional intensity. Tonight taught me that true success isn't about reaching the top of any hierarchy. It's about maintaining your integrity regardless of how others treat you. I look toward Madison, who's watching me with tears of pride in her eyes. It's about understanding that family bonds matter more than social status, that character matters more than connections, and that how we treat those who serve us reveals everything about who we really are. My gaze shifts to Chadwick, who sits slumped in defeat and shame. But tonight also demonstrated that actions have consequences, that cruelty and criminality will ultimately be exposed, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, is rarely denied. Finally, I address the room as a whole. I hope everyone here will remember this evening not just as entertainment or drama, but as a reminder that every person deserves dignity, every honest job deserves respect, and every organization succeeds or fails based on the character of its leadership. The silence that follows feels different from the shocked quiet that greeted Richard's announcement. This feels like reflection, like people processing not just what they've witnessed, but what it means for how they'll treat others going forward. As guests begin to leave, many stop to offer congratulations or share their own stories about overcoming prejudice and proving worth through character rather than credentials. The evening that began with such hostility ends with unexpected connections and renewed faith in justice. Madison approaches me as the crowd thins, her face glowing with pride and relief. "I owe you the biggest apology of my life," she says, her voice thick with emotion. "And the biggest thank you. You saved me from making the worst mistake of my life while showing me what real strength looks like." We embrace for the first time in years, sisters reunited not just by blood, but by shared values and mutual respect. The distance that money and social ambition created between us dissolves as we remember what really matters. Jerome and Patricia join our small circle, creating an unlikely alliance that somehow feels perfectly natural. To new beginnings, Jerome proposes raising his water glass in an impromptu toast. To character over credentials, Patricia adds. To dignity under pressure, Madison contributes. To justice served and lessons learned. I conclude feeling the weight of the evening's transformation settling into something that feels like hope. As we prepare to leave the Meridian Club, I pause to look back at the dining room where so much has changed in just a few hours. The elegant space that witnessed cruelty and humiliation now holds the memory of truth revealed and justice delivered. Tomorrow brings new challenges, rebuilding a company culture, restoring employee confidence, and proving that leadership based on character can succeed where entitlement and arrogance failed. But tonight's events have provided the perfect foundation for that work. The evening's final irony isn't lost on me. The job that was supposed to be temporary income while transitioning between positions ended up being the most important work assignment of my career. Sometimes the most significant opportunities come disguised as the humblest circumstances. What do you think about the idea that true character reveals itself when we think nobody important is watching? Have you ever experienced a moment when someone showed their real values through how they treated people they thought couldn't fight back? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences remind us all that dignity and respect matter in every interaction. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others find it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice, family bonds, and the power of maintaining your integrity no matter what challenges you face. And please share this with anyone who might need a reminder that character always matters more than status. Thank you for joining me tonight for this incredible journey of transformation and justice. Remember that every person you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about, and a little kindness and respect can change someone's entire day or even their entire life. Until next time, keep treating everyone with the dignity they deserve, because you never know when the person serving you might be the person who ends up in charge. Sweet dreams, and may your own character always shine brightest when you think nobody important is watching.